His wife betrayed him. A stranger with a child knocked on his door. What happened when their worlds collided?
He promised himself over and over again that he should clean up the house, but those thoughts only came in the morning, right before work, and by the time he came home in the evening with a bottle of vodka, everything was already forgotten. He would drink fast, collapse on the bed, and fall asleep. Michael had been living like this for over a year, maybe even longer. Everything began the day Jennifer left him and moved to the city, chasing a better life. He had met her at a local dance in the nearby town of Springfield. Michael had never noticed her before, though she was from not too far away. Women usually paid him plenty of attention. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and had a certain charm. Besides, he worked at a farming company, what people now called agribusinesses instead of old collective farms. Michael was considered one of the best tractor operators and combine drivers in the entire company. There wasn't a single machine he couldn't handle. The men used to sigh and joke, "Even steel listens to Mike." He lived alone. His grandmother, the one who had raised him, passed away right after his 18th birthday, as if she had been holding on just to see him grown. Nobody thought he would come back to the village after studying, but he did. He built himself a large house, worked like a madman, and avoided women. He had made up his mind long ago, first get on his feet, and only then bring a wife into his home so that he'd never feel ashamed to provide. From childhood, Michael knew what it meant to go hungry, to sleep shivering because his grandmother tried to save firewood. But when he first saw Jennifer, he lost his head. The wedding happened fast. Jennifer liked Michael right away, but what she liked even more was the chance to escape her poor family. She had been the oldest among many siblings and always had to help raise the others. With Michael, life was different. He spoiled her, buying clothes the village women had never even seen. She quickly got used to comfort. She didn't work around the house, complaining that hard labor ruined her hands or simply saying she didn't want to. They lived like that for 3 years. Then, one evening, Jennifer said words that turned Michael's world upside down. "Mike, how long are we going to stay stuck here? Everyone else is moving forward, going to the city, building lives, and we're just rotting here in the village." Michael stared at him in disbelief.
"I never said I wanted the city, and you never said anything like this either. Where did this suddenly come from?" Jennifer crossed her arms. "I don't want to rot in some village forever. Do you really expect me to waste my life here?" Michael frowned. "You've lived here all your life. Why now? Look, soon I'll get the water system into the house. It'll be just like a city apartment." Jennifer jumped to her feet and paced the room. "My God, you're impossible. What does water have to do with this? What about theaters, cafes, culture?" That day, they quarreled badly. Michael lost his temper and insulted her before storming out. Later, of course, they made peace, but the subject never came up again. 3 weeks later, Michael returned from work to find the house empty. Jennifer was gone. On the table lay only a note. She wrote that she had met someone who understood her, and she was moving to the city with him. She also admitted she had taken the money Michael had been saving in a box, calling it compensation for the best years of her life she had wasted on him. From that day, Michael's life fell apart. First, he sold off parts of the farm. Then he stopped caring about the house. At work, he started showing up with the smell of alcohol. Twice his boss had to talk to him, and both times Michael stayed silent. On the second occasion, he left the office, bought not half a bottle, but 2. A year passed. The house grew messier, colder. Twice Michael had tried to tidy up, but the first time he stumbled across Jennifer's hairpin, and the second time their wedding album. Each attempt ended the same, with him abandoning everything. One winter morning, Michael stepped outside, shivering as the frost bit his face. He cursed under his breath, knowing he'd have to fight with the frozen tractor again. "Excuse me?" The voice startled him. He spun around sharply. Standing in his yard was a woman, or maybe a girl, bundled in worn clothes. Behind her, clinging to her side, was a little boy. "My God, what are you doing here? At this hour, in this cold? With a child?" Michael blurted. The woman shrugged uncertainly. It just happened this way. Do you know if someone here could give us shelter for a while? My son is exhausted, but we don't have any money."
Michael squinted at her face. She looked young, though in the village it was always hard to guess. Her kind usually got turned away, or worse, sent straight to the police. Michael glanced at the boy, no more than 5 years old, then at his watch. He didn't have time. If he was late, everyone would think it was the drinking again. He reached into his pocket, pulled out his house keys, and handed them to her. "Here, go inside. It's warm. You can light the stove if you need. There should be food, probably. Just don't go out too much. People ask questions. I'll be back after 6. The woman's eyes widened, but Michael was already hurrying down the path to the garages. For some reason, not once did he think about whether these strangers might rob him. The whole day at work, Michael couldn't get the image of the woman and child out of his head. No matter how much he tried to focus, he kept seeing their faces, the tired woman and the boy clutching her coat. By the time evening came, he rushed home faster than usual. His heart beat heavily, though he couldn't explain why. As soon as he pushed the door open, he froze. The smell of freshly cooked soup filled the air. The floor was swept, the clutter shoved into corners. In the living room, the woman was quietly folding laundry, while the boy was sitting at the table drawing something on an old newspaper with a pencil stub. When they saw Michael, the boy jumped up. "Mom, he's here!" The woman straightened and smiled faintly. "Welcome home." Michael blinked, unsure of what to say. You cooked?" She nodded. "There wasn't much food, but I managed. And I cleaned a little. I hope you don't mind." For the first time in months, Michael felt something warm stir inside him. He cleared his throat. "No, I don't mind. It's just been a long time since this house smelled like real food." They ate together. The boy, whose name turned out to be Ethan, devoured the soup eagerly. His mother, her name was Sarah, watched him with tenderness, but ate very little herself. When Michael leaned back in his chair, full for once, he said, "You two can stay here for now. No questions asked. I'll think of something." Sarah lowered her eyes. "Thank you. I didn't expect such kindness. Not after—" She trailed off, shaking her head. Michael didn't push. He could see she wasn't ready to talk. Days turned into weeks. Sarah quietly took over the house. She mended torn curtains, washed dishes, cooked simple meals. Ethan's laughter began echoing through the rooms, breaking the heavy silence that had haunted the place for so long. Neighbors whispered, of course. They asked who the strangers were. Michael shrugged them off, saying only that they were distant relatives. People gossiped, but no one dared confront him directly. Michael was respected in Springfield. One evening, after Ethan had gone to bed, Sarah finally spoke. "I suppose you're wondering about us, why we're here." Michael sat across from her, arms folded. "I figured you'd tell me when you were ready." She gave a sad smile. "My husband left me. Or, rather, he threw us out. Said we were a burden. I had nowhere to go. So we just walked, and somehow ended up here. Michael's jaw tightened. And he let you wander with a child in this cold? Sarah looked down at her hands. Some men don't care. He found someone else, someone who doesn't come with responsibility. Silence hung between them for a long moment. Michael wanted to curse, to shout, but he saw how fragile she looked and held it in. Instead, he asked softly, "Do you want to stay?" Sarah met his eyes for the first time. "Would it be all right?" Michael nodded. "As long as you want, both of you." That winter was the first in years when Michael didn't drink himself to sleep. He worked hard, came home early, and found warmth in the small things. Sarah humming while she cooked, Ethan running to the door to greet him, the crackle of the stove fire. By spring, his house looked transformed. The yard was tidy, the rooms bright. Sarah even planted flowers by the porch. One day, Ethan tugged at Michael's sleeve. "Are you my dad now?" Michael felt his throat tighten. He crouched down, looking the boy in the eye. "No, son, your dad is someone else. But if you want, I can be here for you." Ethan grinned. "I want that." Sarah overheard. She stood in the doorway, tears glistening in her eyes. That night, when Michael lay in bed, he realized the emptiness that had consumed him since Jennifer's departure was gone. In its place was something new, fragile, but real. But not everything was peaceful. One evening, a car pulled up in front of the house. Michael stepped outside, frowning. Out came a tall man in a leather jacket. His eyes scanned the yard before settling on the doorway where Sarah appeared, pale and trembling. "Sarah," the man said coldly, "pack your things. You're coming back with me." Michael stepped forward, his voice hard. "She's not going anywhere." The man sneered. "And who the hell are you to tell me that? This is my wife." Michael's fists clenched. "Not anymore. You made your choice when you threw her out. Now leave." For a tense moment, silence crackled between them. Then the man spat on the ground, muttered something under his breath, and stormed back to his car. The engine roared, and the vehicle sped off into the night. Sarah sank onto the porch steps, shaking. Michael sat beside her. "He won't bother you again," he said firmly. She looked at him, her eyes filled with both gratitude and fear. "Why are you doing this for us?" Michael hesitated. Then he said quietly, "Because once someone broke me, and I know what it feels like to be left with nothing." Sarah reached out and took his hand. Neither spoke again that night. After that night, things slowly began to settle into a rhythm. Sarah no longer looked over her shoulder every time the wind rattled the window. Ethan laughed louder, slept better, and started running through the fields like any other village boy. Michael noticed how the house, once a tomb of silence, had turned into a place of life. He hadn't touched a bottle in months. Even his coworkers whispered about the change, though no one dared to ask directly. One Sunday morning, Sarah suggested something unexpected. "We should go to church," she said while tying Ethan's scarf. Michael blinked. "I haven't been there in years." Sarah smiled faintly. "Neither have I, but it might be good for Ethan." So they went. Neighbors whispered even more when they saw Michael walk in with a woman and child. Some nodded politely, others frowned. But Michael didn't care. For the first time in years, he held his head high. After the service, the local pastor shook his hand. "It's good to see you, Michael. Haven't had you in here for a while." Michael only nodded.
But Sarah's smile beside him made his chest feel warm. Life moved forward. Spring melted into summer. Sarah took to making pies, which Ethan tried to steal before they cooled. Michael began fixing up the barn and even bought a calf, planning to rebuild what he had once nearly destroyed. But Jennifer, the woman who had left him, still haunted his thoughts sometimes. Late at night, when the house was quiet, he would recall her laughter, her perfume, the way she had slammed the door that last time. He wondered where she was, if she was happy. And then he would glance at Sarah sleeping beside Ethan in the next room and realize it no longer mattered. One hot July evening, the past came knocking again, literally. Michael was repairing a fence when he heard a familiar voice. "Michael, is that you?" He turned, stunned. Standing at the gate was Jennifer. She looked different, older, thinner, but her eyes still carried that same proud spark.
"What are you doing here?" Michael asked coldly. Jennifer shifted awkwardly. "I came back. Things didn't work out in the city. I thought maybe—" She trailed off, her eyes darting to the house. "Maybe we could start over." Michael felt rage boil inside him. "You left. You stole my savings. And now you think you can just walk back in like nothing happened?" Jennifer raised her chin. "I made mistakes, but you and we had something. Don't tell me you've forgotten." At that moment, Sarah stepped out onto the porch, wiping her hands on a towel. Ethan peeked from behind her. Jennifer's face froze. "Who are they?" Michael's voice was steady. "My family." Jennifer's eyes widened. "Your family? So you just replaced me like that?" Michael shook his head. "No, you replaced yourself when you walked out. You chose your life, Jennifer, and I chose mine." Jennifer's lips trembled. She looked as though she wanted to argue, but no words came. With a sharp turn, she stormed away, muttering under her breath. Michael exhaled slowly. Sarah walked over, concern in her eyes. Who was that? Someone from the past. Someone who doesn't belong here anymore. Sarah didn't ask further. She simply touched his arm, grounding him. That night, lying awake, Michael realized something. He was free. The chains of betrayal that had bound him for so long had finally fallen away. The following weeks passed peacefully. Ethan grew bolder, chasing chickens and trying to help Michael with tools. Sarah laughed more often, her cheeks glowing with life again. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the fields gold, Michael sat with Sarah on the porch. The air was filled with the sound of crickets and the distant barking of dogs. Michael said softly, "Sarah." She turned to him. "Yes?"
He swallowed hard. "I don't know what the future holds, but I want you and Ethan here, not just as guests, as more." Sarah's eyes widened. For a long moment, she said nothing, then whispered, "Are you asking us to stay? Truly stay?" Michael nodded. "Yes, stay. Be my family. I can't imagine this house without your laughter, without Ethan running around. I don't want to go back to silence." Tears welled in her eyes, but her smile was radiant. "We'll stay." At that moment, Ethan burst onto the porch, holding a jar with a firefly glowing inside. "Look, Mom! Look, Mike!" Michael pulled the boy into his arms. Sarah leaned against his shoulder, and for the first time in years, Michael felt whole. Autumn came early to Springfield. The air grew crisp, the fields turned golden, and the trees dressed themselves in red and amber. Michael worked tirelessly, chopping wood for the winter, repairing the roof, preparing for the long, cold months ahead. But this time, he wasn't alone.
Ethan followed him everywhere, eager to help, while Sarah kept the home warm and inviting. The house, once a crumbling shadow, had become a real home. Curtains on the windows, flowers by the porch, laughter echoing through the rooms. Things Michael once thought he'd never have again. But peace didn't mean there were no shadows. One late evening, as Michael was locking the barn, headlights appeared at the edge of the road. A car rolled up and stopped near his yard. He froze. For a moment, he thought Jennifer had returned again, but when the door opened, it was another man. Tall, broad-shouldered, with a cold, calculating gaze, Michael instantly felt unease. "Looking for Sarah Miller," the man said flatly. Michael's jaw clenched. "Who are you?" The man smirked. "Name's Patrick. I'm her brother." Michael didn't relax. Something in Patrick's eyes spoke of arrogance and entitlement. Sarah stepped onto the porch, her face pale. "Patrick, what are you doing here?"
He ignored Michael, walking closer. "Father wants you back home. Enough of this nonsense, Sarah. You've embarrassed the family long enough." Sarah's voice shook. "I'm not going back, not after everything that happened." Patrick's tone hardened. "You think running away with your kid and hiding in some farmer's house makes you respectable? You're still a Miller, whether you like it or not, and you'll do as Father says." Michael stepped between them. "She said no. That should be enough." Patrick narrowed his eyes. "And who exactly are you? Some washed-up loser who let his own wife walk out on him? You think you're fit to protect her?" Michael's fists tightened. Memories of Jennifer's betrayal clawed at his chest, but he stood his ground. "I don't care what you think of me. She's not leaving with you. Not now, not ever." Patrick smirked coldly. "We'll see about that." He turned, marched back to his car, and slammed the door. Before driving off, he shouted, "This isn't over." Sarah sank onto the porch steps, trembling. "He'll tell my father, and my father, he's worse than Patrick. He'll try to drag us back, Michael." Michael crouched beside her, his voice steady. "Then he'll have to go through me first." For the next few weeks, tension hung heavy in the air. Michael worked even harder, reinforcing the fences, fixing locks, preparing as though for a storm. Sarah was quiet, her hands trembling whenever she thought no one was watching. Ethan sensed it too. One night he asked in a whisper, "Mike, are bad people coming for us?" Michael hugged him tightly. "No one's taking you away, I promise." Winter came early that year. Snow blanketed the fields and the roads grew treacherous. Michael hoped that the weather would keep trouble away, but trouble always finds a way. It was Christmas Eve when the knock came, loud, demanding. Michael opened the door to find Patrick again, this time with two other men, rough-looking, their coats dusted with snow. Behind them, headlights from a truck cut through the storm. Sarah gasped, "Patrick, please, not now." Patrick's grin was cruel. "You've had your little fairy tale, sister. Time to wake up. Pack your things. You're coming home." Michael stepped forward, blocking the doorway. "They're not going anywhere." Patrick's men shifted, cracking their knuckles. "You want to fight, farmer? We'll break you." Ethan clutched Sarah's skirt, his eyes wide with terror. Michael's voice was iron. "You take one step into this house and you'll regret it." The standoff stretched, the cold wind howling through the night. Finally, Patrick spat on the snow. "This isn't over. You'll regret crossing us." They turned and left, the truck disappearing into the storm. Sarah collapsed against Michael, sobbing. "They won't stop, Michael. They'll keep coming." Michael held her tightly. "Then let them come. I'll fight for you, for both of you." That night, with the fire crackling in the hearth, Michael made a silent vow. Never again would he allow anyone to tear away the life he had rebuilt. He had lost once before, but not this time. And deep inside, Sarah knew. She had found not just shelter, but a man who would stand against the world for her and her child. The winter in Springfield was the harshest Michael could remember. Snow piled up against the fences, the river froze solid, and winds rattled the house through the night.
His wife
Yet
betrayed
inside
him.
their home,
A stranger
warmth
with a
held
child
steady.
knocked on his door.
Sarah cooked.
What
Ethan
happened
played,
when their
and Michael
worlds
repaired
collided?
tools by the fire.
But the shadow of Patrick and the Millers loomed. Days passed in uneasy quiet, every sound on the road making Sarah stiffen. Then, one evening in February, the inevitable happened. The roar of engines broke the silence. 2 black trucks rolled up the driveway, headlights glaring through the snow. Michael rose slowly, his fists clenching, while Sarah pulled Ethan behind her. The front door rattled with pounding fists. "Open up, Michael," Patrick's voice thundered. "You had your chance. Tonight, she's coming with us." Michael stood firm. "You'll have to drag her over my dead body." The door burst open, snow swirling in as Patrick and 3 men stormed inside. Sarah screamed. Ethan cried. Michael braced himself. Patrick lunged, shoving Michael against the wall. "You think you can defy the Millers?" Michael shoved back, his fury exploding. The 2 men grappled, fists flying, crashing into the table. Chairs shattered. The fire roared as if feeding on their rage. One of Patrick's men grabbed Sarah's arm, yanking her toward the door. She cried out, fighting back. Ethan clung to her waist, screaming. "No!" Michael roared, breaking free. He slammed his fist into the man's jaw, sending him sprawling. Blood sprayed against the floorboards. Patrick staggered, snarling. "You'll regret this, farmer." Michael seized him by the collar, shoving him back toward the door. Snow and wind howled outside. "No, the only thing I regret is wasting even a second fearing you." Patrick's eyes blazed with hatred. He lunged again, but Michael caught him, twisted his arm, and hurled him out into the snow. The others hesitated, glaring, but when Michael advanced, fury in his eyes, they faltered. "Get off my land," Michael growled, "and don't you ever come back." Patrick spat blood, scrambling to his feet. "This isn't over," he shouted, retreating to the trucks. But the look in his eyes betrayed doubt. He had underestimated the man who stood before him. Engines roared, headlights vanished into the storm, and silence returned.
Michael turned, chest heaving. Sarah clung to Ethan, tears streaming down her face. She looked at Michael as though seeing him for the first time, not just as a man who had given her shelter, but as the rock she could anchor her life upon. She whispered, voice trembling but strong, "You saved us." Michael shook his head, pulling her and Ethan into his arms. "No, we saved each other." Spring returned slowly, as it always does, melting the snow and flooding the fields with green. The house in Springfield, once a broken shell of a life lost, now rang with laughter and warmth. Ethan ran barefoot through the grass, chasing dogs. Sarah tended a small garden by the porch, and Michael, once the man who had drowned in grief and whiskey, stood tall again. Neighbors who once whispered behind his back now tipped their hats with respect. He had faced down both his past and Sarah's and had not broken. One evening, as the sun sank low, Michael walked out to the porch where Sarah sat with Ethan curled against her, already half asleep. The golden light framed her face, and for a moment Michael felt the weight of everything he had lived through, the betrayal, the loneliness, the anger. And then, like a shadow lifting, it all faded, leaving only peace. He sat beside her, reaching for her hand. "Sarah," he said softly. She turned, smiling faintly.
Yes? I was broken once, but you put me back together. You and Ethan. I just need you to know that." Her eyes glistened. She leaned into him, whispering, "And you gave us safety, Michael. You gave us a life. That's all we ever wanted." The night deepened. Stars filled the sky. Ethan snored softly on Sarah's lap. And Michael, for the first time in what felt like forever, let himself believe that happiness wasn't a fleeting dream. It was real. Here, in his arms. The ghosts of the past were gone. The future was theirs.